Meghan's legal team has reportedly confirmed a claim that could shake the royal family's inner balance, and insiders say it directly challenges what Catherine was believed to hold for years. Quiet documents, once ignored, are now being re-examined under intense scrutiny. Some sources suggest this changes more than just titles. It could affect influence, legacy, and control. The palace has stayed silent, but tension is rising fast. Watch closely, because one question now remains: what exactly has Meghan secured? It began quietly. No public announcement. No official statement. Just a shift, subtle at first, but powerful enough to send ripples through the royal inner circle. Sources suggest that Meghan's legal team had been working behind the scenes for months, possibly even longer. What they were preparing was not just another routine clarification. It was something far more significant. Something that, if confirmed, could challenge a long-standing belief tied closely to Catherine's role within the royal structure. At first, very few people noticed. Reports indicate that the documents in question had existed for years, quietly stored and largely ignored. They were not seen as urgent, not important enough to revisit. But now, suddenly, they were back in focus, and this time, everything looked different. And this is where things took a turn. Insiders believe that Meghan's lawyers did not simply present new claims. Instead, they reportedly reinterpreted existing details that had always been there, but perhaps never fully understood. This approach made the situation more complex. It was no longer about creating something new. It was about redefining what already existed. That alone raised serious questions. If these documents had been overlooked for so long, why now? What changed? And more importantly, who allowed this shift to happen without immediate challenge? Sources suggest that the moment this legal confirmation reached key figures within the palace, reactions were swift, but carefully contained. There were no public displays of concern. No urgent press responses. But behind closed doors, the atmosphere reportedly shifted. Meetings were held. Conversations became more guarded. And according to insiders, there was a growing sense that this was not just a minor issue. Because this claim, if valid, does not simply adjust a title or recognition. It could influence something much deeper: control, legacy, and long-term positioning within the royal framework. But that's only part of the story. For years, Catherine had been widely associated with this position. It was not just an assumption, it had become a quiet certainty in the public eye. Her role, her image, even her responsibilities seemed to align naturally with it. No one questioned it. No one needed to. Until now. What makes this situation even more unusual is the silence. The palace has not confirmed anything. It has not denied anything. And in situations like this, silence often speaks louder than words. Observers note that when the royal family chooses not to respond, it usually means one thing: something sensitive is unfolding behind the scenes. And this is where the uncertainty begins to grow. Some insiders believe the legal groundwork presented by Meghan's team is strong enough to hold. Others suggest it may still face internal resistance. But no one seems completely certain how this will end. That uncertainty is what makes this moment so critical. Because if Meghan's claim is recognized, it could quietly rewrite a narrative that has been accepted for years. It could shift how roles are understood, how influence is measured, and how future decisions are made within the royal family. Stay with us, because the next detail is critical. There is also the question of timing. Why did this surface now? Why not earlier, when the implications might have been easier to manage? Sources suggest that timing in matters like this is rarely accidental. It is often strategic, calculated, planned for maximum impact. And if that is the case here, then this may not be the end of the development. It may only be the beginning. Because once a legal claim like this enters the spotlight, it becomes difficult to contain. Questions multiply. Pressure builds. And sooner or later, a response becomes unavoidable. But for now, everything remains in a state of quiet tension. No confirmations. No clear denials. Just a growing sense that something important has shifted. And as this chapter closes, one key question continues to linger. If this claim truly holds weight, then what does it mean for Catherine, and how far could its impact really go? For years, Catherine's connection to this role had been treated as certain. It was never loudly announced, yet it was quietly understood. Her public image, her responsibilities, even the way she was presented to the world, all seemed to align with this position. Reports suggest that over time, this belief became stronger. It shaped expectations, both inside the palace and beyond. Insiders believe that many decisions were made with this assumption in mind. Appearances were planned. Narratives were built. And slowly, the idea settled into place as something permanent. But that certainty is now being questioned. And this is where things become complicated. Sources indicate that Meghan's legal confirmation does not directly remove Catherine from anything. Instead, it introduces doubt, something far more difficult to manage. Because once doubt enters a long-standing belief, everything around it begins to feel less stable. Observers have started to notice small shifts. Subtle changes in tone. Careful wording in reports. Even the absence of clarification has become noticeable. According to insiders, this silence may not be accidental. It may be strategic. But that raises another question. If Catherine's position was as secure as it appeared, why hasn't there been a clear response? Why allow uncertainty to grow? Some insiders believe the answer lies in the complexity of the situation. Royal roles and claims are rarely simple. They are built on layers, tradition, private agreements, historical precedents, and evolving interpretations. And when those layers are challenged, the outcome is not always immediate. What happened next raised even more questions. There are suggestions that within royal circles, discussions have become more cautious. Advisors are reportedly reviewing past decisions. Old assumptions are being quietly re-examined. And in doing so, a possibility has emerged that few had considered before. What if Catherine's claim was never fully secured? It is a question that, until now, had no reason to exist. But with Meghan's legal team presenting a different interpretation, that question has gained new weight. Sources suggest that this does not mean Catherine's role disappears. Far from it. Her public presence remains strong. Her responsibilities continue. But the foundation beneath that image may no longer feel as fixed as before. And this is where the tension deepens. Because in situations like this, perception matters just as much as reality. Even the idea of uncertainty can shift how people view authority and position. It can change how future roles are planned. And it can influence decisions that have not yet been made. Stay with us, because this changes everything. Some observers believe that the palace is taking time to fully understand the implications before responding. Others suggest that internal disagreements may be slowing down any clear statement. Either way, the delay is creating space for speculation to grow. And speculation, once it spreads, is difficult to contain. There is also a deeper concern. If this situation continues without clarification, it may begin to affect more than just internal dynamics. Public perception could shift. Questions could become louder. And the pressure to respond could intensify. But that's only part of the story. Because beyond the immediate tension lies a more complex issue, one that connects directly to how royal roles are defined in the first place. If Catherine's position was built on understanding rather than formal confirmation, then what does that say about the structure itself? And more importantly, how many other assumptions might be built the same way? As this chapter unfolds, the uncertainty continues to grow. No clear answers. No firm resolutions. Just a situation that feels increasingly unstable. And as the focus shifts forward, one critical question remains. Was Catherine's role ever truly guaranteed, or has something essential been overlooked all along? As the legal confirmation began to circulate more widely, the atmosphere inside royal circles reportedly changed in ways that were difficult to ignore. There were no public signs at first. No visible reactions. But insiders suggest that behind palace doors, the tone became more serious, more cautious, and far more controlled. Meetings, according to sources, were held quietly. Not the kind that appear on official schedules, but the kind that happen when something sensitive needs to be addressed quickly. Senior figures were reportedly briefed. Advisors were called in. And the situation, once seen as distant, suddenly became immediate. And this is where the pressure began to build. Reports indicate that the concern was not just about the legal claim itself. It was about what that claim could lead to. Because if Meghan's position holds weight, it could shift more than just one role. It could affect how authority and influence are understood within the royal structure. That possibility, insiders believe, has created unease. But that's only part of the story. Sources suggest that within these discussions, there may be differing views. Some advisors reportedly see the legal argument as strong, even difficult to challenge directly. Others believe there could still be ways to respond, though any action might come with risks. And those risks are not small. Because responding publicly could draw more attention. It could invite deeper scrutiny. It could even open the door to questions the palace would rather avoid. On the other hand, staying silent allows speculation to grow, something that can be just as damaging over time. So the question becomes, what is the safer path? What happened next raised even more questions. Insiders believe that this uncertainty has led to a kind of internal divide. Not a visible conflict, but a quiet difference in approach. Some reportedly favor addressing the issue early, before it grows further. Others suggest waiting, gathering more clarity, and responding only when necessary. This careful balancing act is not new for the royal family. But in this situation, the stakes feel higher. Because this is not just about tradition. It is about perception. And perception, once challenged, is difficult to rebuild. Observers have also noted that the longer this situation remains unresolved, the more it begins to shape its own narrative. Without clear information, assumptions take over. And once assumptions settle in, they become harder to correct. Stay with us, because the next detail is critical. There are also indications that the impact of this situation is extending beyond internal discussions. Some sources suggest that those closely connected to royal operations, staff, advisors, and external observers, are beginning to sense that something is shifting. Not dramatically, not openly, but enough to raise concern. And this is where things take another turn. Because when tension exists at this level, it rarely stays contained. It begins to influence decisions. It affects communication. And over time, it can shape outcomes in ways that are not immediately visible. Some insiders believe that this moment could become a defining test. A test of how the royal family manages unexpected challenges. A test of how it balances tradition with evolving interpretations. But no one seems certain how that test will end. The silence continues. The discussions remain private. And the situation grows more complex with each passing day. Because behind every closed door, there is one question that continues to surface again and again. Will the royal family step forward with a clear response, or allow this uncertainty to grow into something far more difficult to control? At the center of this unfolding situation lies something far more complex than it first appeared, a set of legal details that insiders describe as both unexpected and carefully structured. While much of the discussion has focused on the tension between Meghan's claim and Catherine's long-held position, the real weight of the issue reportedly comes from the legal groundwork behind it. And this is where things take a deeper turn. Sources suggest that Meghan's legal team did not rely on new evidence alone. Instead, they reportedly focused on reinterpreting existing frameworks, rules, agreements, and precedents that had been in place for years, possibly decades. These were not widely discussed before. In fact, many insiders believe they were often overlooked because they seemed settled. But now, those same details are being viewed from a different angle. And suddenly, they carry new meaning. Reports indicate that the arguments presented are technical, layered, and difficult to dismiss quickly. Legal experts observing the situation suggest that even small changes in interpretation can have a major impact when it comes to matters of inheritance or entitlement. A single clause, a specific wording, or even a historical precedent can shift the entire outcome. But that's only part of the story. Because the complexity itself may be the reason behind the palace's silence. Responding to a situation like this is not simple. It requires careful review, internal agreement, and a clear understanding of potential consequences. And according to insiders, those elements may not yet be fully aligned. Which raises another question. If the legal case is as strong as some suggest, does the palace have room to challenge it at all? What happened next raised even more questions. Some sources believe that officials are now revisiting past documents, agreements that were once considered routine. These reviews are reportedly being handled with extreme caution, as even minor findings could influence the direction of the situation. There is also speculation that this case could set a broader precedent. And that possibility is significant. Because if Meghan's claim is accepted based on reinterpretation, it may encourage further re-examinations of other long-standing assumptions. What was once considered fixed may no longer feel secure. And that could lead to wider uncertainty within the royal framework. Stay with us, because this changes everything. Legal observers note that cases like this are rarely resolved quickly. They move slowly, often behind the scenes, where details are analyzed and positions are carefully formed. Public statements usually come later, only when there is clarity. But in the absence of that clarity, speculation continues to grow. And speculation often fills the space where facts are missing. There is also a growing question about what has not yet been revealed. Insiders suggest that the public may only be seeing a portion of the legal picture. There could be additional details, documents, or interpretations that have not yet surfaced. If that is true, then this situation may be far from complete. Because each new detail has the potential to shift the narrative once again. And this is where the uncertainty becomes even more difficult to manage. The deeper the legal complexity goes, the harder it becomes to predict the outcome. Even those close to the situation reportedly remain cautious, avoiding firm conclusions. Which leaves one final question at the center of it all. Are there still undisclosed legal details that could change everything? And if so, when will they come to light? As the situation continues to unfold, attention is no longer focused only on the claim itself. The deeper concern now is what it could mean for the future of the royal family. Because according to insiders, this is not just a moment of tension, it may be a turning point. And this is where the stakes become even higher. Reports indicate that if Meghan's legal position is recognized in any form, it could begin to reshape how roles and authority are understood moving forward. For generations, many royal positions have relied not only on formal rules, but also on tradition and shared understanding. But now, that balance appears to be shifting. And that shift may not be easy to control. Sources suggest that within royal circles, there is growing awareness that this situation could influence future decisions. How roles are assigned, how responsibilities are defined, and perhaps most importantly, how clearly those roles are documented to avoid similar uncertainty again. But that's only part of the story. Because alongside internal concerns, there is also the question of public perception. Observers note that the public has long viewed the royal family as a symbol of stability. A system built on clear hierarchy and long-standing tradition. But moments like this begin to reveal a more complex reality, one where interpretations can change, and certainty is not always guaranteed. And that realization can shift how the entire institution is seen. Stay with us, because the next detail is critical. For Catherine, the situation remains delicate. Reports suggest she continues her public duties with the same consistency and composure. Outwardly, little has changed. But insiders believe that behind the scenes, the uncertainty may still be present. Not necessarily visible, but not entirely resolved either. Because when a long-held position is questioned, even indirectly, it creates a level of tension that cannot be ignored. At the same time, Meghan's position, if it continues to gain recognition, could signal a different kind of influence. One that is shaped not only by tradition, but by legal clarity and strategic timing. And this is where things take a final turn. Because this moment may not be about choosing one position over another. It may be about redefining how such positions are understood altogether. If that happens, the effects could extend far beyond this single situation. They could influence how future generations approach similar matters, how carefully roles are structured, and how the balance between tradition and legal interpretation is managed going forward. But no outcome has been confirmed. No final decision has been announced. Only a growing sense that something important is shifting beneath the surface. And as this story reaches a critical point, one question continues to echo louder than the rest. Is this the beginning of a lasting transformation within the royal family, or just a temporary moment hiding an even bigger change yet to come? As the tension reaches its peak, one detail stands out more than anything else: the silence. No official confirmation. No direct denial. Just a carefully maintained distance from the growing speculation. And according to insiders, that silence may be the most revealing part of this entire situation. Because in moments like this, the absence of a response is rarely accidental. And this is where everything slows down. Reports suggest that behind closed doors, discussions are still ongoing. Legal teams are said to be reviewing every angle. Advisors are weighing possible outcomes. And senior figures are reportedly considering not just the immediate response, but the long-term consequences of any decision they make. But nothing has been finalized. And that delay is creating pressure. Because the longer the silence continues, the more attention the situation draws. Observers begin to question. Analysts begin to interpret. And slowly, the narrative starts to form on its own, without official guidance. But that's only part of the story. Some insiders believe that this pause is intentional, a strategic decision to allow time for internal alignment before any public move is made. Others suggest it may reflect uncertainty, an indication that the situation is more complex than expected. Either way, the effect is the same. Tension continues to build. What happened next raised even more questions. There are indications that those closely watching the royal family are beginning to notice subtle signs. Careful wording. Limited appearances. A shift in tone that suggests something is being managed quietly, but seriously. Nothing dramatic. Nothing confirmed. But enough to suggest that this moment is not being taken lightly. Stay with us, because this final detail matters. Because silence, in situations like this, often comes before a decision that carries weight. A decision that must balance tradition, legal reality, and public perception, all at once. And that is not an easy balance to achieve. Some observers believe that when the response finally comes, it may not be as direct as expected. It could be subtle, gradual, carefully framed to avoid creating further tension. Others believe the opposite, that clarity will be necessary, and that a clear position will have to be defined sooner rather than later. But no one knows which path will be chosen. And that uncertainty is what keeps this story unresolved. Because until a response is given, every possibility remains open. Every outcome remains possible. And every question continues to grow. As this chapter closes, the situation stands at a quiet but critical point. Everything has been set in motion. The claims have been made. The reactions have begun. But the final outcome is still unknown. And that leads to one final question. Will this silence lead to a controlled resolution, or is it the calm before a much larger shift that no one is fully prepared for? As the silence stretches on, the situation approaches something that insiders describe as unavoidable, a turning point. Because no matter how carefully this has been managed so far, there comes a moment when uncertainty can no longer be contained. And this is where everything begins to converge. Reports indicate that pressure is now building from multiple directions. Internally, there is a need for clarity. Externally, there is growing public attention. And between those two forces, the royal family may soon be required to take a clear position. But that decision will not be simple. Sources suggest that any response, whether it supports, challenges, or reframes Meghan's claim, will carry consequences. Not just for the individuals directly involved, but for the structure surrounding them. Because once a precedent is set, it does not remain isolated. It spreads. And this is what makes the moment so critical. Some insiders believe that the palace may attempt a controlled resolution, one that avoids direct conflict while quietly addressing the legal complexities. Others suggest that such an approach may no longer be enough, especially if more details continue to surface. What happened next could change everything. Because if even a small part of Meghan's claim is publicly acknowledged, it could signal a shift in how authority is defined within the royal framework. It would show that legal interpretation can reshape long-standing assumptions, and that tradition alone may not always hold. But if the claim is challenged or dismissed, that too carries risk. It could raise questions about transparency, about fairness, about why the issue was allowed to grow before being addressed. And in today's environment, those questions do not fade quickly. Stay with us, because this final turn is critical. There is also a growing belief among observers that this moment is not just about Meghan or Catherine. It is about the system itself. A system that has, for years, relied on quiet understanding rather than public explanation. And now, that system is being tested. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in a way that could have lasting effects. Because once the public begins to question how roles are defined, those questions rarely disappear. They evolve. They expand. And over time, they demand clearer answers. Some sources suggest that preparations may already be underway for a carefully managed outcome. One that aims to protect stability while addressing the legal reality behind the scenes. But whether such a balance can truly be maintained remains uncertain. And this is where the tension reaches its peak. Because every possible path forward carries both resolution and risk. Every choice closes one door and opens another. As this chapter draws to a close, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. A decision is coming. It may not be immediate. It may not be obvious. But it is approaching. And when it arrives, it will not just answer questions, it will create new ones. The story now reaches its most critical moment. Will the royal family resolve this quietly, or is a deeper shift coming that could redefine everything? Meghan's claim, now widely acknowledged, has shaken assumptions long considered settled, impacting influence, succession, and public perception. Behind closed doors, every choice carries weight, and even silence sends ripples. The question remains, will stability return, or is this the start of a new era? Stay updated on every royal twist, subscribe and hit the bell. You won't want to miss what happens next.